Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa Bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Nahi verena verani sammanteda kudachanam averena cha sammanti es Dhammo sanantano parechana vijananti mayametta yamamase yecha tatta vijananti tato sammanti medhaga. Friends and children in the Dhamma, with the permission from Chief Nayaka Hamduru and other members of the Mahasangha, we are continuing the Dhamma talks on the Dhammapada, and we are on the twins, 2 verses. Now, in these 2 verses, we can find about the hatred as the problem, as the sickness, as the misery, unconditional love, metta, as the solution, as the remedy. Long ago, in the ancient India, a woman got married. Times passed by, yet she was childless. She was considered barren. She was afraid that she could be mistreated or ill-treated by her husband and the in-laws. In that fear, she herself recommended for her husband to marry again. So another wife was brought, and that woman in no time was conceived with the child. When that second wife got pregnant, the first wife was filled with jealousy, enviousness. She was so jealous because then she understood her mistake. Since the second wife is pregnant, she is fertile, she is giving birth to children, naturally the first wife is going to be neglected, ill-treated by her husband and the in-laws. Therefore, she decided to not to let the second wife to give birth. She pretended to be kind, loving, and when the second wife, when her womb is getting bigger and bigger. When the child is growing within, this first wife gave some food mixed with certain poison that the child was dead. That fetus was killed. Again, for the second time, when she was conceived, the second wife told the first wife about it, and she did the same thing again. Then in the third time, when she was pregnant, the second wife hid that fact from the first wife. And only when the child was fully grown in her womb, the first wife got to know about this. Again, somehow, she ingested that poison into the second wife's womb. So happened, the child and the mother both died because of that poison. At that moment of her death, this unfortunate woman, the second wife, she was filled with hatred towards the first wife. She vowed to revenge. She vowed to revenge on her future offsprings. She died with that revenge in her heart. And this revenge continued. And this hatred continued. In the next life, she became the predator and the first wife became the victim. And in that life, when the first wife victimized by this second wife, the first wife in that life died in hatred with the notion of revenging. And this feud continued for 7 lifetimes. They were chasing one after the other, being born as animals. They were continuing to destroy each other's offspring, each other's children. The feud continued. By the time Lord Buddha is walking on this earth teaching Dhamma, he was residing in the Jetavana monastery. And at that time, these two, one of them has been born as a human being, the other has been born as a evil spirit. And this woman who got married to a householder gave birth twice. But this evil spirit killed both those children. Those 2 children were killed. And now the third child, this evil spirit was chasing this woman, and that woman was running away with her child. When she got to know that Buddha is residing in the town, and she went to the temple. Buddha was teaching Dhamma. She placed the child in front of the Buddha and begged him to protect her child. Evil spirit, this Kali Yakini, that she devil, she couldn't come in. She was waiting at the gate. Buddha summoned her inside and explained to them how they continued their feud to take revenge on each other from one life after another life, from life to life. How were they continuing this journey of revenge? You have no idea how much you suffer when you are in anger, in hatred. It is compared to something like taking a burning charcoal and throwing at someone else. First you burn your hand. You burn yourself before you burn others. In hatred people suffer. In hatred we suffer. We have no idea. Only the ones who are in misery can generate hatred, anger, enmity within. Only those people who are in misery. You cannot generate hatred when you are happy, when you are joyful. In that happy, joyful consciousness, there is no any space for the hatred to exist. Thus the Buddha says, when you generate hatred within you, that hatred kills you, that hatred torments you, and you cannot bear that tormentation, that you cannot bear, cannot tolerate, cannot contain that immense torture of that anger. You want to make somebody else suffering. We can make only someone miserable, unhappy, suffering. We can torture someone else only when there is hatred in us. Only in anger we can do that. And that hatred cannot be appeased, quenched by hatred itself. As if you cannot appease, you cannot get rid of darkness by darkness. Hatred is like the darkness within us. That darkness can only be appeased, get rid of by light. You just bring the light in. That light is friendliness, love, metta. Buddha says, Es Dhammo Sanantano. This is an ageless Dhamma. This is the law, ancient and inexhaustible. This is a truth forever. That hatred can never be appeased by hatred. That hatred can only be appeased by love. So when there is hatred around you, when you are confronting hatred, you have to confront it. You have to face it with love. Because love, metta, is the only answer, only solution. So the Buddha uttered this verse based on this incident, where two women suffered for 7 lifetimes at each other's hand because they create such a strong bondage with each other, with hatred. We are not just making bondages out of greed, because of greed. We create certain bondages, but the most strong bondage happens because of hatred. And you may have met such people for no reason. You have given no excuse for them. Yet, from the very beginning of your relationship, they torture you, they torment you. These are past created relationships based on hatred. Like Devadatta, who was in his heart, because of his immense jealousy, enviousness towards the Bodhisattva, he was having this immense grudge, anger, hatred towards the Bodhisattva. Though Bodhisattva was not affected by that hatred, Devadatta was continuously being tormented because of that hatred. And he came after the Buddha. He tried to torture the Buddha, though he was failed miserably. Because what he got from the Buddha, only the love. He did not return. He did not got back any kind of hatred from Buddha. Only the love he got back from Buddha. From Buddha, what he got was just the compassion, just the love. So, all his actions based on hatred were like throwing dust into the heaven, spitting to the heavens. The saliva fell on his face. The dust fell on his head. The heaven never got soiled. He got soiled himself. So when somebody is throwing hatred at you, with words or with actions, remember what they are throwing at you is what they have. They have only the hatred in their hearts. Only the hatred they have. So they just throw that hatred at you. But remember, not to throw back. Not to throw back hatred towards that hatred. There will be no limit, no conclusion, no ending But if somebody happens to treat you with hatred, anger, jealousy, you treat that person with love, with compassion. Sooner or later that person bound to either lose his enthusiasm to mistreat you, or his heart is bound to change, or he is bound to get back his karma. He is bound to pay back for his own misdeeds with painful results. Sooner or later there will be a change. Even for Devadatta, who was chasing the Bodhisattva from lifetime to lifetime, life after life, with hatred. But when Buddha's return of love, after some time, he himself said, no matter how much I tried to torture the Buddha, Buddha never had any grudge against me. He just showed me his love and compassion. Please bring me to the Buddha. Buddha will never reject me. Just before his death, he understood all his mistakes, all his wrong deeds, misdeeds, evil deeds. He understood himself. Only the love can appease hatred. Thus the Buddha says, in this world, hate never dispels hate. Only love dispels hate. This is the law, it ancient and inexhaustible. The second verse, Parechana vijananti mayametta yamamase yecha tatta vijananti tato sammanti medhaga. In short, this stanza says, you too shall pass away. Knowing this, how can you quarrel? There was a city called Kosambi. In this city, a huge monastery was built for the Sangha to reside. Number of monks were living in this monastery. And there were two groups of monks. One group was under a master who taught them the Dhamma. They knew the suttas, they knew the Dhamma so well, they mastered the Dhamma. The other group was under a master who taught them the rules and regulations, the Vinaya. And these two groups were living together in one monastery. Once Buddha visited this monastery, his intention was to spend the rains retreat there. While he is residing there, it so happened there was a slight mistake, slight break of rule by one of the monks belong to the group called Dhammadara, or the learners of the Dhamma. This slight error was taken as something grave, something disastrous, break of rule by the fraction of the Vinaya students, the students of the Vinaya, students of the rules and regulations. But the Dhamma learners, they were not ready to accept this, as this is a grave break of rules. They took it lightly, and the fraction, the monks in the Vinaya, in the rules and regulations, they were criticizing. They were demanding those Dhamma learners to confess and to admit that this is a great break of the rules. And they started arguing. Great arguments going on between them. There is no peace anymore, no harmony anymore over a simple break of a rule. Those Dhamma practitioners could have stopped this very easily just by accepting, yes, we accept that one of us break this precept. And those Vinaya rulers, Vinaya students could have not forced on this small break of the precept so gravely, so harshly, but as if they were looking for a reason to argue, waiting for something to happen, they started fighting over this, verbally fighting over this. Now no harmony. They are not functioning peacefully anymore. The temple is not quiet anymore. It is so noisy. When Buddha heard this, he brought both the parties and admonished them. Admonished them not to argue over this and to become peaceful, harmonious, and to work hard for their liberation. It didn't work. They listened to him for some time, and after that again they were fighting over this. They were arguing over that. After the advising for the third time, Buddha gave up. And he left the temple alone. He left the temple alone and went into a forest. Mind you, this is the monsoon season. This is the season where the rains were continuing for days. Torrents of rains continuing for days in this season. At that time, in such a situation, Buddha was living in the forest. For 3 months he lived there. When the devotees of that monastery, when they learnt the reason for Buddhas to depart from their monastery just before the rains, they were angered because they were waiting to take care of the Buddha and to listen Dhamma from the Buddha, to generate wholesome, meritorious energy in them, Because Buddha is in the town. This is a rare opportunity. Now, Buddha is gone because of these misbehaving, arguing monks. And they decided not to take care of these monks anymore, not to offer food for these monks. Monks are going, their arms rounds, but the devotees are not offering anything. They are coming back empty bowl. And then they understood the devotees have taken the situation into their hands. Now for days they were without food. Then they went to the devotees and said, see, now we have reconciled. We have come to an agreement never to argue again. But the devotees said, it doesn't matter whether you are reconciled or not. Until you go to the Buddha and own your own faults in front of him, ask him to forgive you, until then, we will give you food, we will offer you food, but we will not respect you anymore. And after 3 months of the rains, Buddha went to the Jetavana monastery, and these monks went there to see him. At the monastery, when they begged forgiveness from the Buddha, Buddha just said, you were arguing because of a singular reason that you've all forgot. Sooner or later, we are all going to die. We are all going to die. Death is imminent. Death has no guarantee that next moment can be your last moment. Tomorrow, the death may come. Who knows? There is no guarantee that you have this much long to live further. There is no guarantee that you will be given another day or not. Death is at the same time permanent and impermanent. Death is permanent because bound to happen sooner or later. Impermanent because we do not know when it is going to happen. But it is bound to happen. We are lucky if we are to grow old and to die at the peak of our old age. It is a luxury that millions of people in the world do not have, to grow old and die. Because many dies in their young days, as children, as young men and women, in their middle age. Any time the death is possible. When somebody reflects on this imminent death, that I shall die, I will lose this body any time, you will not take into account, in the sense, the things you think so important could be seen as trivia. less important, or no important at all. Because once you are dead, most of the things you value, you think important, significant to your life, become insignificant, valueless. That is the nature of the death. Just think, once I lose this body, none of the things that I consider as valuable, do they matter? Are they valuable anymore or not? Arguing over small trivia or trivial matters happens when we forget that sooner or later we are going to die. You too shall pass away. I also shall pass away one day. I'm going to die one day. Sooner or later it could happen. Then why this quarrel? What is the purpose of this quarrel? Why can't I live this moment peacefully, happily, harmoniously? What is the point of this argument? He is going to pass away, I am going to pass away. This argument is pointless. For two persons who is going to pass away sooner or later, death is a great mentor, a great awakener, eye-opener. Reflection on the death itself enough for us to open our eyes to the truth. That opening our eyes to the truth makes us intelligent, wise, and we will look at things differently with that eye opening. In anger, we are blindfolded. We are closed eyes. Our eyes are closed in anger. But in peace, in love, our eyes are opened. When we understand the reality, our eyes are open to the reality. Then our reaction, our response to that reality is contrasting, completely contrasting to the response that we do when our eyes are closed. These two stanzas, immensely significant, where Buddha tried to awaken us to the truth so that our response to situations where we become immensely emotional. Anger is an emotion which makes us blind to the truth. In that blindness, look at our arguments over trivia, over infinitesimal, insignificant events. We argue. For what ultimately? We just wasted our energy. We just wasted our time for something productive. We just darken our inner self and nothing is solved ultimately. But when such a situation occurs, where the demand for this emotion of anger to arise, take a step back. Look at the whole picture. And according to the Buddha, bring this idea to your head. I am going to die. He is going to die. She is going to die. We are all going to die sooner or later. This idea itself is enough for that great argument over trivia to subside, to vanish. That's what Buddha reminded these monks who are arguing over a trivial issue. He says, you all forgot that you are going to die. If you remembered, if somebody remembered that we are going to die, at that moment, arguments subside. No quarrels anymore. No fighting anymore. That memory is enough. And his advice is, whenever you have the feeling, whenever you are coaxed to be drowned in these arguments, bring this idea to your mind, my death can happen any moment. The one you are trying to argue with can die any moment. Reflect on this idea and you will lose your interest to argue anymore. No more arguments. Death, a pacifier for all arguments. These two stanzas are so significant. One stanza, Buddha says, when there is hatred, when you face hatred, bring love to that hatred. Sooner or later, that hatred will evaporate. Just like when there is darkness, you cannot do anything directly with the darkness. What can you do? But bring the light in. When you bring the light in, brighter the light, more the luminosity of that light is, lesser the darkness you find. So when there is the darkness of hatred is visible in somebody's eyes, you just bring love. Difficult, not easy. Maybe your love is not so strong as the hatred that you can see. Yet, over time, as you continue, your light could be just as strong as somebody else's hatred, and your love can diminish that darkness of hatred. Nahi verena verani sammantida kudachanam averena cha sammante es Dhammo sanantano. In this world, hate never dispels hatred. Only love dispels hate. This is the law, ancient and inexhaustible. parechana vijanante mayametta yamamase. Others don't think that we are going to die here. Ye cha tatta vijananti tato sammanti medhaga. If there is an understanding comes between two persons that we are going to die sooner or later, based on that idea, because of that idea, the quarrels subside. In short, you too shall pass away. Knowing this, how can you quarrel? These are the two stanzas that we explained based on the Buddha's teachings, that hate never dispels hate. Only the love could dispel hate. Think that you die one day. It is enough for all the quarrels to vanish. Es Dhammo Sanantano. This is a Dhamma which is eternal and inexhaustible. Let's share these merits with our departed ones, with the divine beings. Akasatta cha bummatta devanaga mahiddika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakkantu loka sasanang chirang rakkantu desanang chirang rakkantu mam paranti idang me ñātinang hotu sukhita hontu ñātayo idang me ñātinang hotu sukhita hontu ñātayo idang me ñātinang hotu sukhita hontu ñātayo. Blessings for you. Dukkha roga bhayavera soka sabbe upadava anekantaraya pivinasantu cha tejasa jaya siddhi dhanang labhang sotti bhagyan sukham balang siriyayu cha vanno cha bhogang buddhi cha yasava Satavasa cha yucha jiva siddhi bhavantu te ayurarogya sampatti sagga sampatti mevacha ato nibbana sampatti iminate samijjatu. Sadhu Sadhu, sadhu. Good night, everybody.